Well, grab a chair, now don't you make a sound. Hear tales from these old haunted Appalachian grounds. From the Mothman's wings to the skunk ape's call, we'll tell you about the creatures that stand up tall. Got haints and witches and lights in the sky. Jay knows the truth and he'll tell you no lie. So pull up close now for Jay's Haunted Appalachia. Yodelay-hee-hoo! Jay's Haunted Appalachia.
Tonight's true story comes from submitter Bode Maple. And without further delay, I wouldn't say that it bothers me nowadays, but the whole experience comes to mind uninvited sometimes, even if maybe it isn't the scariest story out there. There used to be a village, I am not quite sure if that is the correct term for it, where I would spend the end of my summers. This village was in the mountains and pretty out of the way, but not totally isolated. In theory, you could reach the closest town pretty quickly by car. I'd say in the summer there couldn't be more than maybe 40 to 80 people living there, mostly on the older spectrum. I don't actually know much about the place itself, aside from the fact that it was attacked during World War II and was way more populated before the early 2000s. But either way, I wasn't totally familiar with the area. One summer day, I was exceptionally bored as I was stuck alone at home. I lived pretty much at the very bottom of the village, which was effectively just endlessly sloping gravel roads riddled with houses left and right that are encircled by mountains and woods, and always on an incline. Unfortunately, the bottom of the village was actually the less lively part. The only bar in this village, and most of the people who still live there who weren't past their 50s, lived near the top. I think that day I wasn't really in the mood to deal with climbing up the mountain, especially since it was already getting late in the afternoon. I'm not sure where I got the idea, but I decided to go explore just outside the village, where most of the farmers' fields were situated. I wasn't as familiar with that area because there wasn't much out there. Some fields, an underpass, and an abandoned soccer field that you had to venture way too deep into the woods to reach. I decided to go a little deeper that day than I ever had, just to see if I could discover anything cool there. So I got on the gravel road and went all by myself. I remember I didn't even bring much along because it honestly started out to be more of just a walk, with the exploring part being totally unplanned. After a little while, I took a right turn onto a gravel road, which to my knowledge, this was mostly farmland. This was correct, but only for a bit. It was very peaceful, and there was a stretch of road where the trees on each side spaced themselves out and allowed you to see into the fields all around them. I don't remember how far it actually was, but I figure I couldn't have walked for any more than 10 minutes. But by this point, there was no real farmland, tractors, or even signs of people. Just thick woods. The details are kind of foggy of when it was happening, but I remember being taken completely out of my thoughts when I heard some kind of voice just a little ways off of the gravel road I was on, into the nearby brush. So, of course, I, being the smart person that I am, stepped right off the path to go check it out. I know it might sound foolish, and in hindsight, it probably was. But for context, remember, I had been going to this village for my whole life, and everyone knew each other, or at least everyone knew the name of your parents. So normally, when I heard a voice, my curiosity was raised higher than my concern. After just a few steps, I vividly recall just stopping, mid-step. I'm not sure if anyone has experienced this before, but before I could even figure out why, suddenly I felt fully on alert, like something was wrong. I could actually hear the voice a little better now, but I still couldn't make sense of it. To this day, I kind of struggle with actually describing it, and I don't think I've ever heard anything like it since. I've also double checked through some messages I exchanged with a friend at the time of the incident where I described it, just to make sure I don't leave out something because of a little passing time. It was just off, like it was coming from one of those really old radios, like with that weird filter. It also sounded like it wasn't at the same height as a person, but coming from closer to the treetops. That's how I had described it at the time, and is how I would still describe it today. I could tell it was supposed to be speech, but it was just all wrong. It was unlike any language I have ever heard before or since, and it was like someone was playing it over a radio, not actually being spoken. At the same time, it definitely wasn't some kind of looping audio. Each word had been different from the previous one. What was even more confusing is that when I say wrong, I mean it seemed to not even have a structure. It sort of sounded like someone was playing a very old recording of a church chant or something like that, but played from a tape, had been tampered with, then run over by a car. The voice itself was metallic, not just the sound. It's impossible to explain. Whatever it was, it had scared the absolute hell out of me. I realized I couldn't hear anything else aside from it. No sounds from nearby animals, people, or anything at all. Just this creepy chanting that made no sense being broadcast from the treetops to my front a dozen feet away. But I couldn't see anything because it was away from the dirt path as well, covered by brush and trees. I had this overpowering urge to be as quiet as possible and get the hell out of there. I wanted to run, but I was genuinely too terrified. I've been in scary and sometimes even life-threatening situations, but this felt like a different kind of panic. I couldn't control it whatsoever. I remember it vividly to this day, and it has never happened before or since. I backed away slowly, so quiet to the point of holding my breath while keeping my eyes on the surrounded bushes and trees in the way. I could still hear this voice carrying on the whole time. I don't remember if eventually I got far enough away that I started running, or if I just did this weird backstepping all the way back to the nearest house. But I eventually got home fine. It deeply bothered me for the rest of the day, and especially the night. Usually, I would have gone over to the top of the village after sunset, since the bar was the spot where people would socialize. But that night, I stayed at home and locked myself in securely. I don't think I ever got out of whatever panic mode I had entered until I finally fell asleep. And that brings us to today. I've never gone back to that area ever. I live in an entirely different country now and have never experienced anything like it since. Every part of it, I mean. Nothing I have heard before or since has ever sounded like that voice in the woods, nor has anything ever invoked such an overwhelming feeling of terror for no apparent reason. I don't have a history of auditory hallucinations or any other issues with hearing, and from what I know, that area is deserted. No one hardly ever goes past the fields to the extent where there are no lights or really anything at all. That spot does get a few animals, obviously, but this was definitely speech, just nonsensical. Does anyone have any idea what this could have been, or maybe have experienced something similar? I know there are plenty of stories of voices in the woods, but I definitely haven't been able to find anything about people hearing this kind of metallic, artificial, creepy, disembodied voice in the middle of nowhere. Well, this, I can honestly say, is a first for me, too. I haven't heard of the metallic, creepy, chanting voice being played on a tape in the woods either. But thank you, Bo Maple, for the story. And I've got to say, I'm glad it was you and not me. My spirit would have been left right there on that spot. I would have passed away from fright. But thank you for watching, folks. That's been Jay's Haunted Appalachia for tonight. Keep sending me your stories and suggestions, and keep Appalachia haunted, y'all.
Well, there's haints in the holler and a shadow man too. Ancient critter stories that are haunting me and you. It got mountain lore and alien abduction fright. Hear tales of them strange nighttime flashing lights. So tune on in for Jay's Haunted Appalachia. Yeah!